Okay, Tara Alemany is here with me today. This has been a long-awaited interview for me, and Tara is the founder and owner of Emerald Lake Books. She's here today to talk about aligning your book's message with your reader's reason for reading it. And I just found out before going live that Tara's actually been an entrepreneur since she was 19
Mhm.
and started a company called Tara Inc. with a K by mistake
Yep.
because she was 19. And it's just, I don't know if you have an MBA in business, Tara.
I do not. It's the School of
Well,
Hard Knocks.
okay, well, your book, Published with Purpose, feels like the author's personal MBA pocketbook to me. It's, well, first of all, Tara, I've been waiting for this interview for months. I think you know this already. And your Women in Publishing Summit webinar was my favorite. It was the most holistic and comprehensible snapshot of publishing, like for me at least. And
Thank you.
yeah, I mean, I was very impressed
It's
within
nice to
10
hear.
minutes of listening to you. And your mind maps are awesome too. And
Everybody loves my
also,
mind maps.
I know, yeah. And I think, there are plenty of great books on writing and publishing and book marketing, but your book, Published with Purpose, I'd say is essential reading for all authors, like fiction and nonfiction authors, because you've merged business, marketing, and publishing like the way you do. I think you're just great at visualizing and with the mind maps and bringing things together. You've merged these things that all authors need to do, and you've created this little pocketbook that feels like an author's MBA. And I've read it, I've listened to it, I've reread it. I'd say it's up there with Writing Down the Bones, Save the Cat, On Being a
Oh, wow.
Novelist. Like these are
Thank you.
books. Well, thank you. I appreciated it, and it's like a very quick read, super inspiring, and I think everyone needs to read it at least once in their life if you're an author. And okay, I know we can't cover the whole book and your whole 10 years of experience in publishing, but something you talk about is aligning your ideal customer and reader and knowing who they are.
Hmm.
Can you please explain how to figure out who your readers are and what they want and why this is so important as well?
So there's a lot that goes into that, but sometimes it's just simply starting first with thinking about who's provided feedback on your book already that really found it valuable to their journey as doing whatever it is that you've written about. And this applies to both fiction and nonfiction. You want to know, why did the person pick up your book in the first place? And what situation are they typically finding them in? One of my mentors talks about the fact that you want to know your customers' wants, needs, hopes, fears, pain, and frustrations. And if you make a list of how your author is, or how your reader is feeling about those different things, then the idea is your marketing message is how you move them from whatever that is that they're dealing with to where you want them to be. And actually, before we came on the call, I actually spent a few minutes looking at your book. You've got It's Not Just Line. And so if I use that for an example, you may find that the Frankenstein feeling, which is that fear, that hope, that want, the things that they don't have that they want to move away from. That's, they're tired of feeling sick. They're wondering why healing's so elusive. They just want it behind them. It feels like their life isn't theirs anymore. So when you start writing, you want to keep those feelings in mind at the beginning of the book and at the beginning of your marketing copy. But as you take your reader or your customer on a journey through the book and through your sales copy, you want to move them to what's called the Einstein brain. And that's the brain where they feel confident, they feel accomplished, they feel like their hopes have been achieved. And so in that instance, for your book, that might be something like a message of there is hope. And the disease affects our metabolism. And so I share what I learned firsthand as I looked back on my own life. And the solution will work for your too. And so, those are the kind of things that you want to make sure when you're communicating about your book, that you're taking them, meeting them where they are, and painting a picture of where they can be in the end. And so sometimes that's just a matter of sitting down and writing lists, looking at who's bought your book already, talk to friends who have read your book and loved it and why they raved about it, and talk to those who didn't like it so much and why they felt that way, because it really will help you identify some characteristics about your ideal reader. And of course, you want to have that all in alignment with your passion, with what you're writing about, and the communicating the message that you want to get out there. So there's this marriage that you have to have between what you want to write and why the reader is picking up your book. And when you've done that, it means that it makes it much easier for a reader to tell if this book is for me or not. And the easier you make it for somebody to tell whether or not it's for them, the more quickly they're going to make that decision. They'll move on to somebody else or they'll buy your book. You don't want to leave readers in a stasis where they're trying to figure out if this is for me or if it's not, because that leads to frustration. And the frustration then can be a backlash on you as a writer, because anybody who sees your name is like, I couldn't figure that out last time. I'm not going to look at the next thing. So you want to make it quick and easy for them to opt in or opt out, saying, yeah, I want to take a chance on this.
So that's sort of coming from a place of abundance versus scarcity. I think
Yes.
a lot of authors will try to accommodate everyone and brands in general. I do this all the time. I've been in marketing for a decade. I still do this. And you are so good at niching down with your, I guess, avatar mapping. What would you call it?
We do our avatar differently than you see most places do, because we start with what we refer to as a master list of characteristics. And so we jot down a master list of, what is our ideal reader or our ideal customers' wants and needs? What are their pain points? What are their objections to the content that we might be putting out there? And we look at each of those and create a master list. So when we go to create an avatar, which is a composite of who we're marketing to, who we're trying to reach, we can pick and choose from the master list of characteristics, knowing that that master list is valid for anybody who picks up our list, picks up our book. And so that's the thing is people like to think that my book is for everybody. But the problem is if your book is for everybody, it really doesn't speak to anybody. You really want to be clear on why this book is going to be of value to them. And so being able to create these avatars and communicate your marketing messages specifically to those avatars, you may have 3, 4, or 5 different avatars as your ideal reader, but in your marketing material, you're going to have a marketing message that's specific to each one.
And I do remember that. Now you're ringing a bell, how like you do talk about this in your book, where if you write down all of these values that you think someone would like, they could be all sorts of people, but then you can kind of mix and match the values. So they might listen to Gary Vee, or they might listen to Honoré Corridor, and then you could kind of shuffle these different characteristics around to come up with avatars. And you get so detailed about it, almost like a fiction writer gets detailed about their MCs.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, when we make avatars, we'll actually give them a name, and sometimes I'll even go out on there's a website where you can go to make up fictitious faces. It's a composite of a lot of different people, so it's never one individual, and I'll find somebody that represents that avatar so that as I'm writing my marketing copy, I really have them in mind as to who I'm talking to.
And do you disqualify people who come in as leads? And then I know you talk about creating quizzes.
Yeah, so there's a lot of times where somebody's not a good fit for us, and that may be that they're not a good fit for us, or we're not a good fit for them. We've got somebody right now who reached out to us a couple of times so far that we just know we're not the best fit for her, but she's having a hard time finding a publisher that is a good fit. And I'm like, the thing is I don't think we'd be doing you a good service if we said, yeah, we'll publish your book. I mean, that's what vanity publishers do. And we're not a vanity publisher. We do have certain things that we know are our wheelhouse. And so we want to focus on those things that we know we can really deliver on.
And this is sort of getting a little off topic, but while I have you, I am curious what you think about the publishing industry and and the infiltration of vanity publishers. There's so much going on. How do you know what is legitimate?
That's a passion topic of mine.
Okay,
Um,
good.
I am a member in good standing with the Independent Book Publishers Association, so that's the IBPA. And about 2 years ago, they put together something that they call the hybrid publisher criteria. And it's actually 9 different criteria that a hybrid publisher must adhere to in order to be considered ethical. And I think that all of them are very valid. People talk about the rise of vanity publishers, and it's not really that it's the rise of vanity publishers. What you're seeing is hybrid publishing is the fastest growing sector of publishing. And so you have traditional publishers who are limited as to how many books they can take on. You have self-publishers who are having to learn a lot of information when really they'd rather be writing than publishing. And then you've got this intermediary service provider area that unfortunately has a small segment of bad actors, and they're the vanity publishers. But hybrid publishers fill a very useful service. It means that you don't have to figure out how to coordinate your project team of getting your editor and your cover designer to talk together, or your interior formatter to talk to your editor. Because a lot of times when we're laying out a book, there are problem parts of the book that can only be fixed by my partner and I, who he's the art director, I'm the editor, working together to figure out how to solve it, because it's not one or the other. It takes a small edit and a small tweak in the design in order to get the page to lay out properly. And so as an individual, as an author, there are a lot of professional level skills that you need to learn when you're self-publishing. And it's a matter of, do you want to spend your time learning those skills? If you do, great, go for it. But if you'd really rather be writing and getting your books out there and finding an audience, hiring a team to help you is a very valuable service. And that's what hybrid publishers, for the most part, are. There's a myth out there that if you have to pay a publisher, it's a scam. And, if I use the example of, I can do my car repair. When I got my first car, I did all of my own repair because I didn't have any money to spend on stuff. So I took care of it myself. But as I reached a point where I was ready to move on and use my time in other ways, it was valuable to me to be able to take my car to a garage and not have to fix it myself. To me, it's the same thing. And we never say that mechanics are, vanities and you don't really need them and they don't serve a purpose. I think most of us would be lost without a mechanic.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know where to find my tire, to be honest.
that could use some help, Jess.
Yeah.
You
At
should
least
know where
on
your tire
YouTube,
is.
I'd have to YouTube it on the spot. I'd need data.
Uh-huh. And it is neat how people can do that. There is so much information out there that I'm not knocking. I am never knocking self-publishing or traditional publishing. I think each publishing model has its place. And as a matter of fact, if you go to our website, there's a few different resources related to this. The first one is a quiz
Yeah.
that helps people figure out which publishing model is right for them. And some of the questions asked are things like, how involved do you like to be in the editing process? How important is it to you to have your voice still in the book afterwards? Because if you're using a traditional publisher, sometimes the editing, it doesn't sound very much like you when the thing is done. Things like, how many books are you planning on publishing? If you just have one book in you, why learn an entire industry if you just have one book to write? But if you've got
Right.
multiple books, then learning those skills is going to help you save some money down the line. So there's a place for each publishing model, and the thing really is to figure out which one's best for you. There's actually a article on our blog that is understanding the different publishing models. And so it goes through the pros and cons of each one, because nothing is perfect. And it's certainly not a one-size-fits-all for everybody type situation when it comes to publishing. So understanding what's going to work best for your specific book and your specific situation is very important.
Yeah, there's I think Orna Ross. I'm not sure
Mhm.
if that's her name. Orna Ross from the Authors
From
Alliance.
Ally. Yep.
Yeah. She breaks it down into the publishing process. You've got writing, you've got editing, design, production, distribution, marketing, promotion.
Mhm.
So do you want to do all of that? You can do it. At least you know now what you didn't know before. There's those things to tackle. But after Alexa's publishing 201 course this past week, I just realized that I don't want to do this all myself
Mhm.
because time is money. Like authors, it depends what you want to do. If you are making a huge backlist and you do want to pump out books quickly, I get why you would learn your own formatting, learn all the just own the whole process for the most part, minus editing and cover design.
Just keep
But
in mind that while you're doing those things, you're not writing and you're not marketing.
that's true.
That's the
Yeah.
trade-off.
And there's so much. There's so
Mhm.
much you could do, and you have to kind of mix and match and come up with a strategy that works for you. And it's kind of nuts that we choose to do this, but I
I will.
also go ahead.
The reason that I started doing it is because I self-published 5 books, and, 4 of them I did in 1 year, and 1 came out the next year. And with each one, I encountered something that my mentor refers to as unconscious incompetence. And
Ugh,
I didn't know what I didn't know. And
yeah,
so I had an issue with each one. I have a box full, actually like 3 boxes full of a book downstairs that I can't sell because I didn't know to get a printed proof copy before I had the printer run the print run. Um, and something that we'd done in grayscale was too light. And so the grayscale, it's like, all right, that's throughout the book. So I really can't
yeah.
sell these books. And it was just, I didn't know, and
Yeah,
so that's ultimately why I ended up helping some friends with their books and decided, that I wanted to open up my own publishing company, was to help people avoid these issues because there is so much to know. There is so much to learn. My partner and I will often talk about something called invisible design. And when you are producing a book, it is certain things that need to be done in the book that when it's done right, nobody notices. But when it's done wrong, everybody notices. And people do judge a book by its cover, and they open it up and take a look. And if it doesn't look professional, they often don't give it a chance. And
yeah,
so we help you avoid those things.
yeah. Oh, I just think about doing my own covers, which
Hmm.
I still do my own covers a lot of the time, but getting that print on demand book from Kindle, getting my copy and being so cocky and just publishing it as is, then getting my copy and looking at the spine and how embarrassingly off it was, and
Hmm.
then just opening it and seeing how embarrassing the formatting was. And you can DIY all of these things, but you are competing with 2.8 million books published a year or something like that,
Hmm.
and for the most part we're trying to make this a living and
Right.
establish credibility. So it is tricky. I understand that authors do have to bootstrap sometimes.
Hmm.
um, do you recommend certain services over others that are essential for authors, or is it really like playing into your strengths?
I really, no matter what, I recommend having professional editing done, even if you are an editor yourself. My books that I've written, I've had other editors look at because there becomes this point where you become blind to your own writing. You read what isn't actually there. Another technique that I'll use is in Word, there is a feature that you can have the computer read the text to you. And it doesn't fill in anything, it doesn't substitute anything. And so if you have it read while you're following along the line, you'll notice a missing word or a typo or whatever because the computer's reading it exactly as is. The other thing that I highly recommend is with cover design, because cover design is one of those things that there are plenty of people that are graphic designers, but cover design is a subsegment of graphic design. So every cover designer is a graphic designer, but not every graphic designer is a cover designer. There's certain rules that need to be met in terms of how a cover is designed and understanding how to use those rules and to break them when you choose to, but you need to know what they are before you can suitably break them, is very important. So those are the 2 areas that I always highly recommend: professional editing, professional
Okay.
cover design.
What did you call it? Unconscious incompetence?
Unconscious incompetence.
Yes. After talking to a cover designer, Karen Dimmick, who does
Mhm.
beautiful fantasy covers, I mean, I didn't know what I didn't know. So just talking about how every font, every typography evokes a different emotion and goes with
Mhm.
different niches and categories. I would never think of that. I would just think this looks good, like eyeball it,
Mhm.
and not really think about the reader.
Every genre has its own kind of standards when it comes to the cover design. For instance, if you're doing something that's diet or health related, using blues and greens are very common in the covers, and so you kind of need to do this research. You can't create your cover in a vacuum. You need to understand the category that's going to fit in, the standards for that category, so that you're adhering to those. But then there needs to be that unique element that's you and that makes it pop out and stand out from the rest of what you're on the shelf with. And so we
Yeah.
actually do this experiment when we put together comps, and we'll do this with our author. We'll put together the comps, we'll go through each one and say, all right, so what do you like about this one? And we'll focus on color, image, typography, positioning of design elements. And then we'll show them, we usually have two or three of them, and we'll go through each one of them with the author. They'll usually have a very strong preference as to which one is their favorite. And then we'll say, all right, so now we're going to show them to you in the wild. And so that's where we do a grid where we'll have 9 or 12
Mhm.
different cover images that is what it would look like on Amazon when you're seeing them at thumbnail size. But each of those comps are interspersed in among the titles that it would be showing with. And it is always amazing to us that one of the ones that we discounted for one reason or another is actually the one that stands out the most and that looks the best in the wild. And so we never make a decision fully until we've seen what our covers look like against the other books that they're going to be on the shelf with.
Oh, I need to do that. I need to probably hire a professional for It's Not Just Lime. Full honesty. Should I hire a professional to redo that cover?
I think there are things that you could do with that cover that would make it more eye catching, more
Okay.
attention grabbing. So it's always worthwhile. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, getting help
You
from
don't have a poor
professionals.
one, though. I have seen poor ones.
Thank you.
So it is
Yeah,
fairly good.
it was poor. This is a recover, the third recover. and and I think, well, something I still think about is this section near the end of your book where you talk about how we're all in this journey together, and no matter like where you are, there are people who helped you get there and people who want to get where you are now. And I kind of think about this because that I don't know how long ago I wrote that book, but I know there are authors who are just starting out and it's really overwhelming. And when I'm insecure, when I'm feeling insecure every other day about being an online creative, just exposing myself to the world and the risk of rejection, like I honestly think about this line and how you encourage authors to not just publish with strategic purpose, but also with an altruistic one. And
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to talk about that today before you go. Can you
We
share what it means to?
we refer to the purpose behind the purpose. And a
Yes.
lot of times there is some reason that you've written the book that is beyond making a name for yourself, being read, or having fans, or any of these things. It is something special that you want that book to achieve. And for some authors, it's about building a community. For some people, it's about setting a record straight, maybe righting a past wrong, things like that. For other authors, it's to be able to, have a little more financial freedom so that they can give to their favorite charities and do things like that. And so understanding what it is that is your purpose behind the purpose. It's your why as to why you've taken the time to put yourself out there. Because let's face it, a lot of authors are introverts and we're quite content to remain home and write our stuff and not have to go out in public and all that neat stuff. And so when you put a book out there, you're opening yourself up to some criticism, some rejection, some bad reviews, and all of those things that none of us ever want to deal with. And so understanding what that purpose is behind the purpose specifically for you is very important because it's what keeps you motivated. It's what keeps you marketing your book. It's what keeps you putting yourself out there when you don't really feel like it. And so that's really important to understand and reflect on. And usually I share the story about Andy Andrews talking about the butterfly effect. In 1963, there was an MIT professor named Edward Lorenz, and he wrote something that was ultimately called the butterfly effect. He was working on a computational model for weather patterns in the world, and it was had different variables to it. There were 14 different factors in it, and one went out to like 6 decimal places. And he decided, because he wanted to run the model quickly, that he would only run it out to 3 decimal places instead, thinking that anything beyond that was infinitesimal. And so he ran the model a second time after having done it fully previously and realized that the results were dramatically different, that the weather patterns in 2 months' time from that little insignificant change of one of 14 factors created totally different weather patterns. And so it was hypothesized that a butterfly's wings flapping on one side of the world could cause a hurricane on the other side of the world, which is the equivalent of what this minor change of dropping the fourth, fifth, and sixth decimal places of this one factor was. And the thing is I liken that to our books, to our words, to what we put out in the world. We have the ability to make changes in the world. We have the ability to open people's hearts and minds, to introduce them to new ways of thinking, to bring them in community with one another. We have so much responsibility that goes along with that to use our books well. And that means being brave enough and courageous enough to do the marketing that we need to do to get our books in front of our ideal readers who want, need, and are looking for what we have to share with them. And so to me, that's what knowing your purpose beyond the purpose is all about.
So what if you're terrified? Where do you find that courage?
The courage comes from stop thinking about yourself. Think about your reader. I'm terrified is an I thought. Your reader needs help. That's a they thought. When you think of somebody else and what it is that they will get out of your book, that's why understanding what their wants, their hopes, their needs, their fears, their frustrations, their pain points is all about. Because when you understand that and you yourself understand how your book is the answer, the solution to those problems, then it's about giving somebody a cup of water when they're thirsty. It's about doing good in the world. And I think we're all altruistic enough to want to be able to help one another, and so that is the easiest way to get beyond the fear, the self-consciousness, the introversion. It's wanting to be able to make a difference in the world.
And that's why I keep rereading your book, because it's just because of my ego, I guess. It's nice to get out of it and be like, okay, I need to think about other people, think about the people who are cheering me on and do it for them, but also do it for the reader. And it's just such a holistic approach to looking at why write, why do it for the reader, why business, and thinking about your ideal customer is important. And you jam this all into this tiny little book. And like, this is 10 years of publishing experience, and I can tell you've thought about exactly what needs to be in this book. And thank you, Tara. This book is definitely on my must-read list for everyone in the community. And to everyone watching this, please grab Tara's Purposeful Publishing Pack, where you'll actually get this book, Published with Purpose. And you have another book, 61 Questions.
Yes, that's also included in the Purposeful Publishing Pack that is part of the Boost Your Business Bundle. And so that is actually going back to our conversation about, how do you know which publisher to go with? We give you a list of 61 questions that allow you to compare publishers so that you're comparing apples to apples. It is things that typically are covered in contracts that most authors don't know to ask about or inquire about, which means that when you do sign a contract, you're going to understand what's in it and how it applies to you.
Okay. The tedious, boring stuff that most people don't think about, that is probably the most important thing to think about.
It's things like, do you end up with a basement full of books when something doesn't sell or gets returned? Those kind of things.
And that sounds like something that happens a lot.
It does to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Returns are one of those things that most authors don't really think about or even know about, and yet can be the most problematic thing for many authors.
Yeah. And you also have a book launches simplified course
Yes,
and
I have.
many other publishing services.
I do. I'm the host of the Publish with Purpose Summit that's going to be in October. So there's all sorts of things going on. But the Book Launches Simplified course is a full course with over 9 hours of content that is really about how to plan your launch, knowing what your goals are for your reader, what your reader's goals are, what your goals are, what the book's overall impact. How do you put together a marketing plan that allows you to accomplish that and that's tailored to something that you would feel comfortable doing? So that's that. And then a segment of that, a sampler of that, is what is the part of the premium bundle in the Boost Your Business bundle.
Okay. Well, I appreciate having trusted sources out there. Like I know there's a lot of options. There's a lot of like coaches and gurus, and I know that I can trust your stuff, Alexa's stuff, Michelle's stuff. And again, publishing 201 way over my head, and and it just makes me realize how important it is to invest in yourself. And sometimes that means investing in pros who know what they're doing, not just doing it all yourself all the time. As solopreneurs, that can be hard, but I would like to, I know we've gone a little bit over, and I'd like to just thank you for being here, Tara. You know that this
For
has
inviting
been,
me.
well, this is sort of like a bucket list thing for me to interview you. And in fact, hiring you and Emerald Lake Books in some capacity is on that bucket list too. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jess.
This was worth the wait.
I'm glad to hear that. And I'm
Is
sorry
there
you waited.
is there anything else you'd like to say before we say
Just
goodbye?
thanks so much for being as generous and giving as you are. I've enjoyed looking
Me
at
too.
the videos on your YouTube channel, and keep up what you're doing. You're doing something special here.
Thank you so much.